Welcome back to Billionaire Success Lessons. Today, I want to tell you the story of a man whose life proves that success does not always begin with a dramatic invention, a garage startup, or a bold public persona. Sometimes success grows in a quieter way. Sometimes it grows through responsibility, patience, discipline, and the ability to carry a legacy without letting that legacy crush your own identity. That is what makes Jim Walton's journey so powerful. He was born into one of the most famous business families in America as the youngest son of Walmart founder Sam Walton. But his real test was never whether he would inherit wealth. His real test was whether he could transform inheritance into stewardship, pressure into purpose, and family legacy into long-term leadership of his own. That is why his story matters. Many people imagine that being born into a famous family makes life easier in every way. And yes, it opens doors. But it also creates a different kind of pressure, one that many people never fully understand. If you come from nothing and build something, people admire the rise. But if you are born into greatness, people watch you with suspicion. They ask whether you earned your place. They wonder whether you are simply benefiting from somebody else's dream. They judge your effort through the shadow of a last name. Jim Walton's challenge was not only to succeed, it was to prove that he could carry the weight of a name already tied to one of the most important companies in American history. Jim Walton was born in 1948 in Newport, Arkansas, into a family that would soon become central to American retail history. His father, Sam Walton, founded Walmart in 1962 and built it into the largest retail sales chain in the United States by 1990. That means Jim did not grow up around an ordinary business. He grew up near a force that was reshaping how millions of people shopped, how stores expanded across small-town America, and how scale, logistics, and low prices could transform an entire industry. Just imagine what that kind of environment does to a young mind. It can inspire you, but it can also make it difficult to know who you are. Apart from the family enterprise, as he got older, Jim Walton took a path that reflected preparation more than showmanship. He graduated from the University of Arkansas in 1971 with a bachelor's degree in business administration. That matters because strong leadership is often prepared quietly before the world sees any title. The public usually notices the wealth, the chairmanship, the influence. But underneath those things are years of learning how numbers work, how institutions function, and how decisions ripple across a business. Jim Walton was not simply stepping into a family fortune. He was learning how to operate within it. Soon after graduation, he joined Walmart and worked on real estate transactions. That may not sound glamorous, but it is exactly the kind of work that teaches a future. Leader how a growing company expands in the real world. Retail does not grow through slogans alone. It grows through land deals, location, strategy, timing, negotiation, discipline, and execution. Jim Walton's early work was grounded in the practical machinery of expansion. He was not standing above the business and abstraction. He was learning how the business moved on the ground. Then his path began to shift. By the mid-1970s, he was put in charge of Walton Enterprises, the Walton family office, whose holdings included the Bank of Bentonville, later renamed Arvis Bank. This is one of the most important turning points in his story, because it reveals that Jim Walton was not destined to be known only through Walmart. He was moving into another arena, one that demanded a different kind of intelligence. Banking is not retail. It requires a different pace, a different sensitivity to risk, a different understanding of trust, capital, and long-term institutional strength. While Walmart was the giant public symbol of the family legacy, Avis became one of the places where Jim Walton could shape a legacy more directly through his own style of leadership. Over time, that quiet path became a major one. Jim Walton became Arvist's chief executive officer and helped turn it into the largest bank in Arkansas. He later stepped down as CEO in 2024 after helping shape the bank into a major regional institution. This is where the heart of his story begins to emerge. Jim Walton did not become significant only because he held Walmart shares. He became significant because he helped build and guide a serious financial institution over decades. He took something connected to the family office and helped shape it into a durable regional bank. That is not passive wealth. That is active stewardship. And stewardship is the word that best captures his life. Some people are remembered because they create from scratch. Others are remembered because they protect, strengthen, and grow something that could easily have weakened under poor leadership. Jim Walton belongs to that second category. His gift was not loud self-promotion. His gift was careful continuity. He seems to have understood something many people miss. When a family becomes powerful, the future is never guaranteed. Wealth can disappear. Institutions can become lazy. Values can fade. A legacy can be consumed by people who enjoy it without strengthening it. Jim Walton's life suggests a different response. He stayed close to the work. He stayed close to responsibility. He stayed close to the systems that allow success to last. And that does not mean the road was easy. In some ways, his challenge was more subtle and more difficult than a typical startup story. When someone builds a company from nothing, the world can easily see the battle. But when someone inherits visibility, the inner battle is often hidden. The struggle becomes identity. The struggle becomes whether you will be known as your own person or only as someone's son. The struggle becomes whether people will ever see your discipline instead of only your advantage. Jim Walton had to face that kind of challenge for years. He had to build credibility in a world where many people assume heirs do not earn their position. He had to lead quietly in a culture that often rewards loud personalities, and he had to do all of that while carrying a surname. That already meant something enormous. There is something deeply human in that, because many people, in one form or another, know what it feels like to live inside someone else's expectations. Maybe not on a billionaire scale, but in spirit. Maybe they grew up in the shadow of a strong parent. Maybe they inherited a family responsibility. Maybe they stepped into a business that was already built. Maybe they were handed a role and told in effect, now prove you deserve it. Jim Walton's story connects because it reminds us that inherited responsibility can be just as emotionally demanding as building from zero. The task is different, but the pressure is real. Another major chapter in his story came when he joined Walmart's board. After the death of his brother John in 2005, he served on the board from 2005 to 2016. That period matters because it placed him directly inside the governance of the company his father created. By then, Walmart was already a global powerhouse. Decisions at that level were not small. They affected workers, investors, vendors, communities, and the wider retail economy. To serve on that board was not to hold a ceremonial seat. It was to help shape judgment inside one of the most consequential companies in the world. This is where his story becomes even more meaningful. Jim Walton was not trying to become a second Sam Walton. That would have been impossible and probably unwise. Great successors do not survive by copying founders line for line. They survive by understanding the essence of what came before them and then expressing responsibility in their own way. Sam Walton was the iconic founder. Jim Walton became something else. A quieter institutional steward, a banker, a board member, a family leader who helped sustain the architecture around the fortune and the companies that fortune came from. There is wisdom in that. Too many people believe success means becoming the loudest person in the room. Jim Walton's life suggests that sometimes success means becoming one of the steadiest. And that kind of steadiness is not easy, because the larger the institution, the more ways it can go wrong. Banking demands caution, risk management, patience, and trust. Retail at Walmart's scale demands governance, long horizon thinking, and discipline across massive operations. Family wealth adds another layer, preserving unity, intention, and continuity across generations. Jim Walton lived at the intersection of all three. He was not merely balancing spreadsheets. He was living inside the long, complex responsibility of helping a family enterprise remain effective as both business and legacy. That is why his story carries such strong life lessons. First, not every important victory is visible. Some of the most valuable work in the world happens quietly, over years, inside institutions that need wisdom more than applause. Second, inheritance is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a test. What matters is not only what you receive, but what you do with it. Third, identity has to become larger than the labels people put on you. Jim Walton could have spent his life being introduced only as Sam Walton's son. Instead, he built a serious reputation in banking, governance, and family stewardship. There is also a lesson here about temperament. Our culture often worships charisma, noise, and constant visibility. But Jim Walton's path suggests that calm leadership can be powerful leadership. You do not need to be flashy to be effective. You do not need to dominate headlines to influence outcomes. Sometimes a measured person with long-term judgment can do more for an institution than a louder person chasing attention. In that sense, Jim Walton's life is almost a quiet argument against the idea that success must always look dramatic. Another dimension of his life is philanthropy and regional investment through the broader Walton family mission. The Walton Family Foundation focuses on education, environmental work, and advancing communities through long-term access to opportunity. This matters because it shows that the Walton legacy is not only about accumulation, it is also about trying to shape communities and opportunities beyond the walls of business. Whether one agrees with every choice or not, the underlying point remains powerful. Lasting success eventually has to ask what it is building for beyond itself. That long view also appears in other parts of his life. Jim Walton also became associated with broader regional influence through banking, publishing, and local investment. Again, this reflects a pattern. He did not seem interested in becoming famous for one spectacular move. His life looks more like a long series of steady commitments, each reinforcing the other. family office, banking, governance, publishing, philanthropy, and long-term regional presence. It is a quieter model of power, but in many ways a more durable one. And maybe that is the deepest reason. His journey belongs here on Billionaire Success Lessons. Because Jim Walton reminds us that success is not only about being first. It is not only about being loud. It is not only about building something where nothing existed before. Sometimes success is about becoming trustworthy enough to carry something immense without letting it collapse. Sometimes it is about protecting value, growing it wisely, and passing it forward with discipline. Sometimes it is about making sure a legacy becomes stronger, not weaker, because you touched it. If you're listening to this in a season of life where you have been given responsibility, this story should speak to you. Maybe your challenge is not to invent something from zero. Maybe your challenge is to carry something well. Maybe you inherited a family duty, a business, a role, a reputation, or a burden that you did not ask for, but still must bear. Jim Walton's life offers a powerful reminder that this kind of calling matters too. The work of stewardship is real work. The work of quiet leadership is real leadership. The work of proving that discipline can be stronger than ego is real success. And if you ever feel underestimated because your strength is not flashy, remember this story. Jim Walton did not build his reputation through performance. He built it through years of responsibility. Through banking leadership, through board service, through long-term institutional judgment, through staying in the work even when the work did not make him the most visible person in the room. That kind of success may be quieter, but it is not smaller. In many ways, it is deeper. In the end, Jim Walton's story is not just about money. It is about legacy, identity, patience, and purpose. It is about how a person born close to greatness and still have to fight to become fully himself. It is about how responsibility handled with discipline can become its own form of achievement. And this is about how success is often measured not just by what you create, but by what you preserve, strengthen, and pass on. That is why Jim Walton's journey deserves a place here on Billionaire Success Lessons. Because his life reminds us that not every empire is carried by the person who lays the first brick. Sometimes history is shaped by the person who protects the foundation, strengthens the structure, and quietly makes sure it can endure for another generation. And that too is a remarkable kind of greatness.